Like you'll figure it out. Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Aireonna, joined by the wonderful Tom Jensen. Tom, you're looking great today. How you doing?
You too, Ashley. Yeah, I'm doing great. Looking forward to what we got going on now that we finally have the Niners in camp.
Yeah, definitely have some stuff. Now, to start this off, I didn't even prep you on this, but I did ask you before we ended our last show, if when you and I got together today, if you thought Brandon Aiyuk would be on the team with a contract practicing. He is not. Oh, if all of a sudden it got a little bit loud, I just had a giant truck pass by. But He's gone now. So,
all right. Yeah, I'm not surprised on Aiyuk. I think that if something happens, it'll be late.
See, I like kept giving myself
outs.
Yeah, because I originally said before training camp, right? And then I was like, okay, well, I actually, the first day was kind of meetings. So I just mean the first day that they're on the field. Then they were on the field. And then I was like, well, actually, I mean the first day of padded practice, because that's when Deebo Samuel got signed. And today was day 2 of padded practice. Brandon Aiyuk is still holding in, meaning he's standing there, but not on a contract, not on the team, not practicing. To be fair, when we were initially making these bets in the middle of the offseason, I didn't anticipate that there was also going to be a Trent Williams side quest that the 49ers were going to try to have to deal with tonight.
It complicates things. There's no question.
I feel like that ties up a little bit of the money potentially.
Well, and the time and focus. That the bigger issue for the Niners is getting Trent signed, because without Trent, they're done. Season's already over. So they have to take care of Trent. And I think that they'll make it a higher priority to take care of Trent and just put Aiyuk in the back burner for now and make sure they got Trent signed.
And do you think that the Trent Williams deal will get done before the Aiyuk deal then?
Yeah.
That's interesting. I totally agree. It's of higher importance and priority. Same thing happened with CMC. Do you think that Brandon Aiyuk at all is regretting how this was handled, or?
Probably. He probably feels like he's a victim of timing, that if a deal was structured earlier in terms of the Niners making real offers, he could have already been signed a long time ago.
Yeah.
But the Niners lowballed him to such a point that he couldn't even begin to really talk contract with them. And by the time that they got real, it was too late. And now you've got CMC extension got done. Now you've got Trent plus his own deal. It makes it a lot harder to get done.
What's interesting is on the Pivot podcast, Brandon Aiyuk was talking about how they almost got a deal done earlier on in the offseason, but for whatever reason, the 49ers didn't meet exactly what Brandon Aiyuk wanted. And then the Jefferson deal happened. Amon St. Brown, I can never say his name, poor guy. But his deal got done. And then Aiyuk said, the offer has changed. Like, what I'm willing to accept has changed. It's now gone up. And I feel like at that point, when Aiyuk was doing that podcast and all that, he felt like he had a little bit of leverage against the team. And it seems like now with the Trent Williams deal, just by how he's been standing with John Lynch and going to, Kyle Shanahan said that for people that didn't see his quote, said he's been going to all the team meetings,
right?
Keeping up with the game plans and all that. The only thing he's not doing is actual, practice out on the field, but he's training in the locker room or in the training room, all that.
In the weight room, yeah.
I wonder if the 49ers did give him like an additional offer and maybe upped it, and if it wasn't to Aiyuk standards, I wonder if once the Trent Williams news came out, do you think that Trent Williams wanting a new contract is a shock to Aiyuk? Like, do you think he found out when we did? Or do you think the 49ers were like, hey, we can't offer you this because we're also trying to get a deal with Trent done?
The timing might have been a surprise to Aiyuk, but Trent wanting an extension was pretty logical extension of the CMC talks.
By the front office, if anything.
Yeah. Well, and we both said, I believe, I know that I did, that the CMC extension would lead to other veterans wanting the same thing.
Yeah, we did.
And you said that too. I
Especially
said
because it
that.
got done with such
And
urgency.
so I think Aiyuk
felt
would
like-
know from that sense that he knew that Trent was outstanding in terms of it wasn't necessarily resolved. So he knew it could happen, but I think he might have still been a little bit taken by surprise by just when it went down in terms of being the most public at camp.
I'm just wondering if there was an offer that happened before the Trent Williams news went out publicly. Like, I wonder if that deal is still on the table or if it's gone down. Because it kind of feels like
I would
now
think it's still on the
everyone's gonna be
table. I would think that they would have a take it or leave it position on what's there now.
Okay.
And then Aiyuk is hoping for the Niners to make one final move late toward him.
Like a panic. It's going to be
not
week
necessarily
one.
not necessarily a panic, but just a step in his direction contractually. And if that happens, I think Aiyuk would take it. But I still think it's possible that the Niners just say that's take it or leave it, and if we leave it, then we're going to roll over, and it's going to be the $14 million fifth-year rollover, and then it's how does Aiyuk respond to that?
Well, from what we've heard, I wonder if these training camps, they're kind of up and down. So far, we've had 2 padded practices. It feels like going on from here, maybe we can start to see like routines being established. For example, like is the offense winning the day more, or is the defense winning the day more? Yesterday, from all reports, it was hard to really judge the offense. Obviously, Brock Purdy did throw some interceptions and stuff, but it was hard to judge them because the offensive line just wasn't holding up and everything. And then from everything we heard today, the first part of team periods, offense was doing really well. Debo made a nice, down the field play, catch. But then I wonder if Brendan and I started to feel better because it kind of feels like there's no one on this team that, at least with consistency, can get open. Debo Samuel, you and I have definitely talked about this offseason. Is there going to be kind of a him or me type of thing going on with Debo Samuel and Aiyuk throughout this year? If they really do end up making Aiyuk play on that 5th-year option, feels like Debo Samuel really wanted to make sure everyone knew he was coming into training camp in shape, and he's, doing everything he can potentially to try to secure himself with the team. If it does end up being, Aiyuk or Debo. But unfortunately, and this is kind of a slight against Debo. Like, I feel like we were like, yeah, Debo's in good shape, but also like, we shouldn't have to celebrate that. That should just be a given, right?
Well,
like
it should, but since Debo's weight has been an issue, there's contract year Debo and there's otherwise Debo, and that's unfortunate, but it's true. And so he's in great shape this year, and we'll see. But even Debo in great shape still can't do Aiyuk things. That's what's hurting them
from today's training camp, right? Is that even with Debo in tip-top shape, he still is not, the same route technician that I would think of Aiyuk. I think of Aiyuk, who is someone who consistently can get open against coverage, where Debo more needs to be schemed open, have those, crosser pass where the ball is put right on him and, Kyle dials him up more so than just one-on-one against a guy who can get open.
Right.
That's never, and maybe
that's not his game.
It's not his game, but it feels like the offense was missing that piece today, especially later in camp or later in the day as the practice went on. And against certain defenses, that's going to be really important to have a guy who can open or get open against coverage. And that's when you really see, like I said, it felt like, in my opinion, that maybe there was a day where Aiyuk was like, "Ooh, should I have accepted that deal? Like, this offensive line doesn't look good. The wide receivers are looking okay." But then today, I feel like Aiyuk left there feeling like, "Yep, you're missing me on the field, right? Brock Purdy's missing me on the field, right?"
Yeah. Well, Purdy has grown accustomed to throwing to Aiyuk, and so there's definitely a relationship there in terms of Purdy knowing how to read Aiyuk and where he's going. That Steve Young talked about this with Jerry Rice, that you could read his body language and know where he was going. The defender didn't, but the quarterback could read it and anticipate. And when you have that kind of a dynamic with a receiver, it makes you more effective as a team. It helps your timing, it helps your rhythm, it helps your accuracy. And those are the things where Brock is having trouble right now. And I think all of that is a factor of not having Aiyuk, not having Trent Williams, and second guessing to a degree. And his timing is off. And so you know where Aiyuk's going to be. You don't necessarily know where Debo is going to be. And part of that is just Aiyuk's skill set is beating coverage. And that's not a skill set that anybody else in the team has. To a lesser extent, Juwan Jennings, but he's not as quick. So just somebody doing what Aiyuk does, the team might have thought that, well, we drafted 2 receivers and we've got Debo and we've got Jennings, we'll be okay. Yeah, these practices are proving not necessarily. And your opening game is against the Jets. And they're one of the best pass coverage secondaries in the league. You don't have Aiyuk, you're in trouble. Definitely. And so that's an issue for them. They have to figure that out.
Now, speaking of Brock Purdy, we've hinted at it, but for, I don't know who hasn't heard, but Brock Purdy threw 4 interceptions today. He threw 3 yesterday. So that's back-to-back days, the first 2 days with pads on, and Brock Purdy has thrown 3 or more interceptions. Now, I know a lot of people like to say, his interceptions are him trying things or camp stats don't matter. I would disagree with that. And we can maybe boil it down to decisions, but then if I was looking at today, I would say there was actually 6 possible interceptions, and I would still think that at least 3 to 4 of them were on Brock Purdy. Yesterday, same thing. One of the interceptions you could say was not on him, but 2 of them, in my opinion, were pretty bad decisions on his part. I think that it's important to keep an accurate tale of how Brock Purdy is reacting when he gets, as you said earlier, intimidated. And I think that this is important because eventually the 49ers need to make a decision on if they're going to pay Brock Purdy $60 million. And when he has around $60 million, Jordan Love just got paid, 55, right? A little bit. Yeah. I'm assuming that Dak Prescott is going to get more than Jordan Love. And then if the cap, continues to go up / just the way that quarterback contracts happen, the next guy is usually paid around or more than the previous guy. So I think that Brock Purdy's number is going to be pretty high. And are you going to be able to have all of these all pros? Like right now we're saying we're talking about camp and how much he misses Brandon Aiyuk. And I understand because Aiyuk is maybe this team's best, true wide receiver when it comes to really beating that coverage and getting open like we're talking about. But when Brock Purdy is worth that much, they can't afford to have an all-pro at every single level. Eventually, they're going to have to let go of some of these guys. And when you look at even a Dak Prescott, which, 49ers fans make fun of him, when you look at, better established quarterbacks like Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes, even Joe Burrow, Joe Burrow does have 2 wide receivers at least, but when you look at Josh Allen or Mahomes or even a Dak Prescott, they really have one guy. Where right now Brock Purdy has multiple wide receivers and a tight end and a star running back. That to me is not something that you can count on after this year. And maybe the reaction for fans could be, well, that doesn't matter until next year. But I would say that that's not entirely true because they're trying to figure out if they can afford Brandon Aiyuk right now. And a big part of that is because they know that they have Purdy's contract coming up. So I guess I'll start by asking you, do you think that training camp stats matter? And then we'll go into Brock Purdy's performance the last 2 days. And I found some correlations between the actual season games that I'd like to talk to you about. But before that, just do you think that stats matter? Not even just interceptions, but training camp stats. Do you like?
I think that the numbers specifically don't matter, but the trend lines that the numbers represent do matter. So if you're throwing a lot of picks, that's a concern. I don't care that there's 3 versus 4 I don't care if there's 2 dropped and 4 caught. I care that there's the trend line, there's the pattern of Brock not throwing the ball well, and
not
getting
making good
picks,
decisions.
and then try to figure out, okay, why. And no Aiyuk, no Trent are the first 2 that jump out, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But then beyond that, it's he needs to feel comfortable, and he's not. And so why is his timing off? Why is he second guessing? And again, it's Aiyuk and Trent. So if you don't have what you're accustomed to having, then you can push and make mistakes. I think the people that say that, well, Purdy's experimenting, that's true. And he said as much, that this is a practice where I focused on deep routes. This is a practice where I focused on throwing the ball at a certain spot or with certain timing or anticipatory throws or what have you, where he will have a day where he'll focus on an element. And so he can have more picks on a day when he's trying to throw deep.
Okay.
Just because that's who he is.
It's like a more challenging throw.
Right. But the trend line of throwing 7 picks in 2 days is still a concern.
Yes.
And to me, that concern points to no Trent, no Aiyuk.
And then if you go to the regular season, last year, the only games that they lost were no Trent, no Debo.
Right.
So we're starting to see a pattern of no Trent and then one of their many offensive weapons out. And Brock Purdy, all of a sudden, I think the whole thing with him transitioning from college to NFL was, in college, he felt like it was all on him. He was really pressing to make the play because he felt like he had to be the one to make it. And to me, it's a little bit concerning that with only 2 guys out, all of a sudden you see, flashes of that Brock Purdy flaring his head, when in my opinion, you still have plenty of talent that you can rely on.
Oh, no question.
But be enough.
The Niners don't have a replacement for Trent Williams as part of the problem. Is that
that's a big one.
There's no backup for Trent. And that's part of why Trent has so much leverage, is that he can say, look, you guys, I missed 3 games, part of 1 and 2 others, and you lost all 3. There's a reason for that.
Yeah, I feel like.
And so he's got the ultimate leverage on top of no backup for him.
What I think is interesting is even last year, I was being like, oh, like no Debo was really affecting him. And I'm pretty sure it was you. You were like, the no Trent thing is a big problem. No Trent is a really big problem. And then now we're in training camp and Debo's there. And everyone who was saying, oh, it was Debo. Well, Debo's there and he's still having that same problem struggling. Is it completely that it's just Aiyuk, or is the overriding thing that we're seeing is when pressure is coming down on Brock Purdy and he has to make a decision in 2 seconds because his offensive line isn't holding up, that's not a good formula for him to make a smart decision.
Right. Well, Purdy needs to be in his Zen space where he can just react almost instinctively and just play. And when he does that, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. The problem is when he gets knocked out of that Zen space, what happens to him? So for the Niner offense, for me, I kind of look at it as synchronized gears, that you need all these things to operate in a certain way, in an order, in a pattern that allows Purdy to succeed. And so part of that pattern is Aiyuk beating his man. That gives him one option. And then what happens around him, plus how the defense reacts to CMC and Debo, plus what does the line do? And so for Purdy to be at his Zen space, he needs all of those pieces there because that's what he's accustomed to having. And that's when he operates well. It's when you don't have one of those gears, that's when he starts to either doubt himself and go down a bad road, or he's just impatient, or his timing is off or something. But he presses a little bit, and therefore it all doesn't fit together.
We saw that going back to the Ravens game, we saw something similar to what has been reported today for camp, where basically you make one, he makes one bad decision, gets an interception deflected, so like it's not even actually intercepted, it's just like a bad throw that you're immediately being like, ugh, as a fan. But you anticipate that Purdy, who's been praised on being poised and level-headed and calm, wouldn't have that same tightening. But for some reason, after that one bad, like almost throw that if you save it right there, if you've played golf, it's like you can have one bad hit, but if you spiral, then your next one's going to be shit. And instead of, making it a bogey or something, it's going to take like 10 shots for you to even get in the hole because you're like mad and you're hitting it and you're kind of freaking out. You got to be calm, level-headed as a quarterback. And I feel like Brock Purdy gets a ton of praise for kind of like being in that flow state, that Zen state when just going back to how he entered the league, coming in with basically no preparation, again, middle of the game against Miami, the very next game going against Tom Brady, it was like almost automatic that this lore of Brock Purdy, his ability just to like be ready for the moment. But then, yeah, he has like one bad pass, and in the Ravens game, then all of a sudden it just was like, throwing the ball to the other team. And you almost like in those losses, I remember thinking like, this doesn't even reflect Brock Purdy to me. This doesn't look like Brock Purdy. It's weird watching this person play because it's so far from what I've become accustomed.
Yeah, it's not what we're used to at all. Right.
And that is really how this today's training camp practice seemed to have gone. He threw back-to-back bad passes that could have been interception, one to Fred Warner, one to Lenore, I think. But both of them were dropped, and he could have saved it right there. But for some reason, he gets spooked or intimidated, and then 4 out of 5 passes, he throws 4 interceptions. One of those potentially is a little bit on Jennings. People are saying, if he would have reached out for it a little bit, Jennings could have gotten that. But at least 3 of them were completely bad decisions just on Brock Purdy. And that's not a good trend because yesterday, another
string of bad passes.
Yeah. So it's really, I agree with you. Maybe it doesn't matter the exact number of interceptions or what's happening, but I'm going to be interested if there's a continuation of multiple interceptions back-to-back practices. That's in my opinion bad, especially because I've heard people be like, the interceptions thing shouldn't even be a conversation with Brock Purdy because we've seen him play a whole year and he took care of the ball. But his interception probability rate was actually pretty high. He just got lucky. And maybe he's just going to be a lucky person. I will say, I remember during the season when people were saying like Brock Purdy's getting really lucky. Another guy who has a high interception rate is Patrick Mahomes. I'm not trying to compare them as quarterbacks, but he's a guy who just happens to get really lucky. So maybe for all of Brock Purdy's career, he's really lucky and the ball stays protected. But I will say, in college, he turned the ball over a lot. In the losses that they've had, it's not like the 49ers have just like, oh, we lost by a little and, it was a hard-fought game. The wins have been 30 to 35 points. The losses are multiple interception games, not just one interception games. Yeah. When Brock Purdy is lost, he has fully started to spiral. And that is what we've seen be a habit in the last 2 training camps. And I'm not trying to overreact because really quickly for Jim Everett, I just want to say hi. And then I want to say, this is Tom.
Jim's telling a joke. Yeah. I am not Larry Krueger. I am not related to Larry. And nice comment from your dad.
There. Preach, Tom. That is the main reason I kept saying that they needed to draft O-line the last 2 seasons. Kyle didn't like picking O-line because they aren't flashy or entertaining. Big hang up.
To me, it's not necessarily flashy or entertaining. It's just he's the offensive coordinator, so what he's going to be most invested in are the chess pieces of his design. It's a way of expressing his level of expertise is that, look what I can do in scheming these weapons. Here's how I can design the field itself to scheme guys open. And I think they're seeing that they made a mistake in not trading up ahead of Baltimore to get Rosengarten. And I think that's what they did, was they were surprised that Baltimore took Rosengarten ahead of him, even though there were a number of mock
I don't
drafts.
know why they were.
There were like 4 mock drafts that had Baltimore taking Rosengarten where they did. It couldn't have come as a surprise to the Niners that happened. And so, I was saying before that draft that if they want Rosengarten, they're probably going to need to trade up from second round. And they didn't, and here we are.
And that would have not only helped them for the future as Brock Purdy, if they do, really give him that contract and the team, they start to turn it over and have a new core, it would help them to have someone who was learning it right now. But also just with their contract negotiations going on with Trent, I'm not saying that because they had a rookie, all of a sudden they'd be like, oh, we don't have to pay you. But right now, Trent is literally like, you don't have anyone. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It makes the situation more dire that they haven't drafted a tackle since 2021. I mean, that's just malpractice. And part of the, I brought that up in my last article on Kyle on the offensive line, is that the drafting needs to have more balance. It's one thing to say we don't really value offensive linemen, we take them late. It's another to take weapons ahead of offensive linemen, even when you have the best set of weapons in the league. That's where it's overboard. That's where it's overkill. And that's where they get hurt.
If you're building a team from scratch, it might be important to get your quarterback and get him a weapon. But when you're the 49ers and you have like 10 weapons and like 7 of them are all pro, then maybe protecting your quarterback and letting him have the ability to actually get the ball in their hands without having his elbow ripped off could be important. But
plus an investment in the offensive line is a rising tide that lifts all boats. Your primary weapon going forward is going to be Brock Purdy. So the best investment you can make is to help Purdy feel more comfortable as a thrower. And we're seeing that now in practice, that he lacks that comfort zone right now because he doesn't have Trent and he doesn't have Aiyuk. And we're seeing the result, a lot of picks. And to your point where he can spiral out of control, I would argue that there's moments or things that can take his focus away. Rain. He hasn't played well in the rain. Every rain game he has
winning,
except for except for rain.
I've already
one
lost
time
one
in
of our
Seattle.
The Aiyuk bet, so now I've moved on to the Seahawks one, and I'm still hoping.
Okay, there you go.
I'm that type of
just
poor loser that I'm like, okay, I'm losing now. We don't have to talk about that bet anymore. It's on the
that bet's done. One bet. So go from there. But it's just there are a lot of things that can trigger Brock, and we're seeing that. Rain is one of them, and he apparently doesn't have full command of dealing with simulated pressure because he doesn't know where pressure is coming from. He had the bad game against Baltimore, simulated pressure, and then he had 9 unblocked pass rushes in the Super Bowl, simulated pressure again. So if there's one thing that the Niners need to show in camp, in the training, and also in the exhibition games, is that they can deal with simulated pressure now. And that's going to be a concern immediately, is that the Jets can do that. Everybody can do that now.
Yep.
Everybody will be doing that in the league. That's going to be copycatted by every defense in the NFL. The Niners are going to have to prove they can deal with that. Last year, they proved they couldn't.
Yeah, and that offensive line is going to be interesting. From all reports, Pooney looked really good in there today. Obviously, it's it's very early stages, but I'm happy to hear that. At least it feels like some rookies, it's like an automatic redshirt year because they don't even fit in, and it feels like body style, size-wise.
That's a big part of it, is that, especially at offensive line, to be effective, you need to develop NFL core strength, and that's something that you don't have as a rookie. It's why a lot of these guys don't play their first year, or they don't succeed in their first year unless they're already developed and have that NFL core strength.
By the way,
so in Pooney's case, and Grant pointed this out when he first saw Pooney on the field, is that he doesn't have that core strength yet. He's a college player in body type. And so technically he can learn things and he can get better, but once the game's start and he goes up against somebody that's bigger and faster, it's going to be hard for him.
That's going to be interesting because Spencer Burford, by the way, for anyone who didn't hear, he broke his hand, which I feel bad because I know it feels like he's some people, is it fair to say it feels like he's tried very hard and that his mind is in the right place, but he's struggled a little bit.
He played tackle. He played tackle in college at UTSA. And
the
while he's moved to guard, I don't think that he's really
them in the wrong
ever
position,
felt comfortable there. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Niners are fond of kicking people inside, and that happens a lot where it's just there are college players who you identify and say that they wouldn't do well on an island, so they have to move inside. That's the conclusion they drew with Burford, but he hasn't been fully comfortable, I would argue, playing inside.
I agree. I found it interesting. I would like to know, did you listen to Banks talk yesterday in his press conference? I pointed out, I think it was Matt Barrows asked a leading question to Banks where he brought up Spencer Burford's play and how Burford had taken some responsibility for that and said it was hard on him. And even Chris Forrester had kind of talked and said, you know, a lot of people are going to be looking at Burford, but they're not going to look at the fact that Banks did something similar, and they're not going to look at me, the coach, and say, why didn't you, prepare this guy for this moment correctly? And then Barrows kind of, once again, asking a leading question, said to Banks, like, how do you console or like give advice and relief to Spencer Burford for that? And I thought it was kind of interesting. Banks went like, oh, like that's a hard memory to bring up.
He punted it. Yeah. He just said, I don't really want to deal with that.
I don't want to answer that question.
I understand it though.
I had two takeaways. One was the Super Bowl loss weighs on him so hard that he just like doesn't even want to like remember, reflect on that. And he doesn't like that. And to that, if that, once again, this is one or two options, but to that, I would say like, this question isn't actually about the Super Bowl. It's about how do you lift up your teammate, and why are you like, to me, that's more on Kyle Shanahan. If your players are still so distraught over the Super Bowl loss that they can't like answer a question about it, that's kind of bad, because how are you ready?
Worrisome.
How are you, prepared to go take on a whole new season when maybe you might go on a losing streak? And is that going to defeat you? Like, if you're still in this mindset where you're so upset over this loss, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be upsetting, it's good, but like, to me, I was like, dang, like that's kind of scary to me if the Super Bowl loss at this time of the year, when they're supposed to be the most like, we're going to go back and get them type of thing, if they can't even, talk about it. And then my second thing was, I was remembering when John Feliciano went on Twitter and basically put Burford on the bus and told everyone that, hey, that play is on him. And then that made me wonder, like, does Banks blame Burford? And maybe that's why when he's asked this leading question that is solely about, like, how do you make your teammate feel better when he's blaming himself? Like, to me, it's just a PR professional answer to be like, oh, like, I put my hand on his back and tell him we're going to get him next time. But he couldn't even fake that. So I was like, does he blame Banks? I don't know. And maybe I'm off there. But
yeah, it's hard to pin down because you don't really know. But at the same time, I think what Banks' answer was essentially saying is, that's not on me. That's on the coaches. The coaches have to teach him up and allow him to recover emotionally from something like this. It's what the coaches have to do to prepare us for the upcoming year. So I think that's a big part of it. And the other part is Banks just saying that it also speaks to Banks not fully recovered emotionally either.
Yeah.
That, I don't want to talk about this. And there's a lot of guys on this team who are, Robin saying therapy, maybe so. It's just, they need to get past losing the Super Bowl twice. And that's a very hard thing to do. It's a hard feat.
Like, I don't want people listening to us be like, well, like, how would you get over it? Like, we agree that that's emotionally taxing, but what we're saying is, if you're not at that level yet, that's very scary going into the new season. Like, you have to. Why that's, as you said, that's not on Banks. That's on your head coach fostering the.
And on Forrester, on the oline, on the position coach. And I give Forrester credit for saying that he has to take some of the blame for the missed assignments in the Super Bowl. And I thought that was stand up of him, but at the same time, it speaks to your entire staff had an opportunity in facing Baltimore to go to school on simulated
words
pressure.
are nice, but did you actually?
You all could have understood it. You all saw the game where here's the defense you're going to face from Kansas City.
Yeah.
You've already seen it. Now learn, grow, adjust. What they do? They didn't learn, grow, or adjust. They did the same thing, and they got beat the same way. 9 unblocked pass rushers. And so that's a failure on Forrester, on Kyle in not getting high-level offensive linemen of just Trent Williams and the Mary minimums. Is that really going to work? No. And so I think that's part of it too. But all you can do at this stage is move on. So what I said last week when I was talking about the need for emotional stamina and process is that I think that's something they're going to have to work through, especially in camp and in the exhibition games, is you have to train your mind to get ready for these regular season games. You have to put the Super Bowl behind you, difficult as that is. And I think that the way they put it behind them is playing in games and just getting in the flow of process that, okay, here's what I need to execute. Here's what I need to do. And then you can build on the success you have in those games to then train your mind to say that, okay, we've done this. We're successful. We can win. Now we're ready to go forward and win the first few games of the season. But I think the process is their path. I think that's how they're going to have to get through it.
I agree with that. I wanted to address Papa J, who said, and I think this was in reference to Banks being asked this question, that it could disrupt the chemistry of the O-line. I think it's the opposite. And once again, I'm not in there. I don't know the players, but I felt like the way he answered it could disrupt the chemistry. I think just saying the PR, like, he's our guy, it's not all one play. Like, we've heard people say this before, like, over other losses, like even Tart, the dropped interception that he could have done, the Christian McCaffrey fumbling, like what other people say is like, it's not all one play. What Banks could have said there is, I made mistakes. Everyone, it was a team loss. It's going to be a team success this year. We're, bringing us back around, and we want everyone to wipe that, and we want to come in this year strong. That would have, to me, showed confidence that not only did Banks have Burford's back, but Banks was over the loss himself.
Right. And his answer proves that he didn't, that he wasn't.
He wasn't. Yeah. And being around pro athletes and being around teams that won championships and lost them, I've seen this mindset of just, you can be sort of shell-shocked, and it just takes a while to recover emotionally from it. And that's kind of
it's easy to say, just be tough. Kenny says, wipe some dirt on it. Yeah, I get that. I get the mindset. You're right. But easier said than done. When you lose a second Super Bowl, and you lose a Super Bowl
where
it
really sows doubt in you.
Death by a million cuts, or death by 1,000 cuts.
You're the better
there's a lot of self-induced mistakes, especially from your coaching staff. You have to look around.
2019, they could tell themselves, like, they're a year ahead of schedule. They were kind of lucky to be there. The Chiefs had the better offense. Like, this year, it feels like a stab in the heart more, not only because is it the second Super Bowl that they got to and lost, but also year after year, almost getting to the Super Bowl. They know how much work it took to get there. And then when they get there, they're the better team with more weapons, with a great coach, with a healthy quarterback. Like, all the previous excuses that they had no longer apply. They're the better team that most people are picking to win, and they can't get over that hump. That's a really hard mental feat to get over. Now, I will say, like, Steve-O, kind of blaming it on the reporters, says, how do they get past the Super Bowl when reporters and YouTubers keep bringing it up and asking content questions about it? I would say our definitions of getting over it are different. So what you're saying is kind of what Banks did, right? Like, getting over it means just not addressing it. That's not getting over it. When you get over something, you can talk about it. You can say where you went wrong, say where you can improve. Like, you're not afraid to think about it. Getting over it means I have like I feel comfortable with this subject and it doesn't hurt anymore. I don't need to avoid it because it doesn't instill that doubt in me at the same level. I'm never saying that the guys on that team aren't going to wish that they would have won that Super Bowl. Of course, that's not something that is ever going to go away for any of them, especially because every team changes a little bit. So they're going to think about that team and all that. What I'm saying is there's a level of comfortability with the fact that what happened and we're moving on and we have belief that we can do it again. That's what I mean by getting over it, where you're not like still drowning in the weight of it. And when you can't talk about it, to me, you're not ready to go win the next one because you're not yet moved past or comfortable with the one that you just lost.
Which is why I keep talking about process, that the way you get past it is by playing and executing. That until you get to that point, you're going to continue to drown a little bit. You know, they're not going to fully get over it until they play on the field. Period. Robin the Bay says the better coach won. Yeah, I would adjust that to the better coaches won. That
both sides of the ball.
It's not just Andy Reid. It's Spags. It's the DB coach. It's all of them. It's Veach, the GM. You know, it's a better constructed team. You can look at it and say the Niners have the better team. Yeah, maybe. They have more stars. Do they have the better team? I don't necessarily think they do. I think that Kansas City was more balanced and that Kansas City had the better team in its overall execution because they have Mahomes, because they have a better line, and because they had a better defense, especially once Greenlaw went down, then the Niner defense really started to leak water, and they couldn't hang on. So it's a combination of all of these different factors. But regardless of what you point to for why, you still have to recover from it emotionally. And you know, my experience in covering teams in the past is that they need to play they need the process as their self-healing. That's how you get past it. That's how you move on.
I completely agree. I did want to touch on Brock Purdy recently had an interview with Mike Silver, and I want to learn how to put the little like things on the screen. I saved it to my computer as a document, and I think I know how to do it, but then it kept saying failure to upload. So I'm just gonna read it because I have this quote that I think it ties into the mental poise that we talked about with Brock Purdy. But I was a little bit shocked hearing this from him. So Brock Purdy told Mike Silver, it's that Tom Brady kind of feeling. Late in the game, it always felt like Tom was just going to take over and not make it close. I feel like I can get that. So really quickly again, Brock Purdy says when prompted to ask how he feels like he can, the level, has he reached his peak yet? Has Brock Purdy optimized himself? And Brock Purdy said no. And what he's striving for is that Tom Brady feeling. Late in the game, taking over, not letting it get close. He feels like he can get to that. Now, that's great words, but when we're talking about,
you got to put it into action, though. Yeah.
Doesn't freak out when they make one wrong decision. I mean, my dad is less, he's always arguing in the house that Tom Brady isn't actually the GOAT, it's Joe Montana. And he's always talking about cool Joe, and the Joe could throw interceptions, be down, whatever. But at the end of the game, he was cool as a cucumber. Now, I wasn't necessarily alive during these times, so maybe some of this is revisionist history on my dad's part. But
no, your dad's calling it straight. I was there. I saw those games. And Montana was as cool as it got. That you could be, you look at the Cincinnati Super Bowl in Miami where, you have to score a touchdown to win, and he's pointing out John Candy in the crowd. Hey, there's John Candy. And it disarmed the entire team. And they just got in a relaxed point, and they just marched down the field. And so that's Montana, is that in that moment, he's the eye of the storm. And in that moment, I would argue that Montana is the best in history in that context. But that Brady could win a game more ways than Montana could.
Perfect.
So
now before
you give him part of it, but not
before
all.
the chat goes crazy and starts debating on which one is more of the GOAT, I'm gonna ignore that one and let everyone have their own opinions because I don't think we're changing any minds. But what I want to know, because I think that the feeling that Brock is calling up is the same, whether it's Cool Joe or Tom Brady. He's talking about someone who late in a game could be losing and you still have confidence that he has the mental poise, maybe the memory of a fish, and he can play that final fourth quarter as if it's the first quarter, take over and run with the game. He literally says, feels like Tom was just going to take over and not make it close. That particularly is interesting because Kyle Shanahan is a coach that always makes it close at the end, that when winning usually loses it at the end. He almost, brings up the exact opposite feeling where you can be up and you're like, is Kyle Shanahan going to blow it? No offense. Like, I like Kyle.
Yeah, well, that has to be in your head, though.
Yeah.
Because
so what I'm saying is, like, do you think, because I found it kind of interesting for Brock Purdy to, and maybe, obviously you have to have tons of self-belief to get to the position he's in.
Sure.
But he relates himself to Tom Brady in this situation or to, Cool Joe, and says that he thinks he can get to the level where he can be losing and then in the fourth quarter take over and run away with the game. Is that something that you've seen from Brock Purdy that you feel like does exist within him? And do you think
sorry, go ahead.
A coach like Kyle Shanahan, it's possible for him to do that?
Yeah, that's a caveat. But as we talked about earlier in the show, that Brock hits a point of zen where he can just operate and he doesn't really even know the moment. He just knows to execute. And that's where Brady got. And that's where Purdy, to his credit, sees that's the value, is that where I need to get is to a point of zen where no matter what happens, if it's raining, if defensive linemen are coming at me, if there's a DB coming in on a blitz unblocked, that I could deal with it.
And if I just threw a bad pass that got intercepted or almost got intercepted. That's kind of what we're saying in training camp. Is it feels like
that's where he has to get.
Sometimes.
Yeah. I give Brock credit that he's aware that he needs to know that he has to get to that point. And therefore he knows he's not there yet. But that is the next step of his progression as a pro and with further command of himself, that he can stay zen regardless. And that's what Montana did. That's what Young did. That's what Tom Brady did. And that Purdy says that in order for me to be great, in order for this team to accomplish its goals, that's where I need to get to. He's not there yet, but he knows that that's the mountaintop. That's where he needs to get to.
It definitely is. I'm always so interested because I feel like Brock will go up to the podium and be like, oh, shucks. But then we get these sound bites of him or these random interviews where he's really not full of himself in a negative way, but very self-confident. And it can be a little confusing because you're like, are you the Brock on the field that's telling, Kittle to shut up and telling Mike Silver that you're going to invoke Tom Brady within yourself? Or are you the guy who goes up to the podium and you're like, oh, geez, just me and my teammates, it's kind of.
Yeah. Well, he's a walking contradiction with that stuff of just the G shucks at the podium and then the guy that's, cutthroat and get everything exactly right on timing on the field. Different thing. Brock listening to Jesus take the wheel down the fourth.
Jesus take the wheel, take it from my hand. Do you want to know something? Just a side horrible story. My grandfather's parents, so my great grandparents, I don't know why that was difficult. They used to live down the road when I was a kid and lived in Rio Neto. They lived in Guerneville, and I would go over and they were like 90s. They were so old, and we would pickle carrots or tomatoes or whatever random things. And I wanted to sing Carrie Underwood's Jesus Take the Wheel in my talent show when I was like 6. I can't sing, by the way. My best friend, love her to death. We're driving in the car and she'll be like, you're not even There's not one note that's accurate. Like, and I'm screaming loud. I'm confident with it. I'm Brock Purdy comparing himself to Tom Brady with it. I'm not shying away. Although sometimes, like, I remember when I was in high school, I went on this date and we went to a concert. And I remember like trying to kind of sing at the cadence that like the singer was singing. Because I was like, if I just sound quiet enough, maybe he'll mistake my voice for the singer.
There you go.
So that didn't happen.
Did it work?
I did sing Jesus Take the Wheel at full volume to my great grandparents, and now they're dead. So that's probably what happened. You know, I killed them.
Yeah.
Also, they're like, 100 and something. They were great people who lived full lives, but
good for them. And they've got people that they can look down upon with a lot of pride. With you in your life.
Yeah. That wasn't relevant, singing, but it did. Carry on.
But yeah, it ties back. It ties back. There's still
really quick. What a phenomenal! I saw her in concert at Fresno State. That's the college, right? Fresno State in Fresno. My best friend and I went and saw her. Dude, she's a better singer live than she is. It's crazy.
There are some that can do that. She's just
so great,
absolutely gifted. There are some people who you see live and you say, "Wow, they've been auto-tuned into the ground."
Yeah.
And then there are other people, in my case.
You're like, you need that. You're like, you.
Yeah. I can't sing a note. I'm terrible. But the great live singers are my band, Earth, Wind & Fire. Maurice White, great live. Philip Bailey, amazing live. Yeah, they don't need any auto-tune at all. They're phenomenal singers. And so it's just, do you have the gift or not? No. In the Olympics, I was moved by what Celine Dion did, given everything that she's gone through physically. And then to close out the opening ceremony like that was really moving.
Incredible. I completely agree. That was a great performance. Don't worry. I forgot that they were still arguing about Tom Brady in the comments. And I thought that the guy who was saying Tom is the GOAT, I was like, oh, he loves you, Tom. And then I remembered he's
wrong Tom.
Talking about Tom Brady. But I'll bring us back. Really quickly to maybe end off the stream. I have heard some things about certain players, and I wanted to ask you, have you heard of any standout players that you've been excited from the updates that you've heard so far and you want to continue to keep an ear / an eye out for them for the rest of training camp? I have two people in mind that I'd like to highlight, but I thought I would start with you. Okay.
All right. The first one would be Malik Mustafa.
Yes.
That's not a surprise because he was my favorite draft pick. And I thought that he would be the highest impact rookie, and he's showing it right now.
Yes. I love. And do you think with Huff supposedly going to be ready to return for week 1, do you think that they will have him starting, or do you think Mustafa has a chance to kind of, at least in the beginning of the season, while maybe Huff is like coming to form? How do you think that that's going to turn out with Jair Brown, that safety position?
We're going to need to see where Huff is in his recovery, because there's one thing to be fully recovered and not worry about re-injury, and then there's another level of getting into game shape and being ready to make plays, and then to play instinctively. And so I think that they're going to need to be careful with Huff.
Kind of Huff's game too, right? Like he wasn't necessarily built on like speed. It was like his quick twitch ability to kind of like read the quarterback and make an interception, to go do a blitz. Like a lot of what he relied on was more what you would call football shape versus regular shape. And so same thing with health. There's a difference between like, I can walk on this knee and I can jog on it and I can do, practice to the side, versus game speed, reading the quarterback, not having,
you have to play without thinking about it.
About your muscle.
Yeah, you have to be able to play instinctively. So that's going to be the hurdle that Huff has to clear. If he does, he'll start, and that'll be it. And I think that they will lean in that direction of saying that, all things being equal, if Tufunga's ready, he starts. And I think that he would start together with Jair. Because they tend to like to have sort of a half free, half strong safety anyway in the way that they play. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if those are the two, provided Huff is fully recovered in game shape, able to plant off his knee without even thinking about it. No worry of re-injury. He can just go out there and play instinctively. If you have that Hufanga, he starts. Anything short of that, Mustafa should play. But I still think that they'll get Mustafa reps. He'll still get his chance to play on certain downs in certain packages. Because remember that he can play corner and safety, so he can be a hybrid player for them and find more ways that he can contribute.
I'm interested also in like who's going to be starting for that secondary, because I guess it'll just depend. Like there's more days of padded practice, but we've heard things about Yadam sticking out, and then I've heard he kind of struggled a little bit today, but yesterday had a really good day. He did lock up Debo, but I don't know how impressive that is because Debo has trouble getting open.
Right.
My standout was going to be Diamador Lenore. I think
this
is really going to be, you know how like last year Charvarius Ward had his career year, like he's played well, but he really broke out. To me, this is that year for Demo. Like he's been on, you know, as long as health prevails.
He's ascending.
And it feels like he's really ready to take off. I just love his attitude too. He's like on Twitter fighting back, but then he went to the podium. He was very respectful. He did give a lot of praise to Brandon Staley, which was a whole other thing that I wanted to talk
that's
about
a little awkward.
Called Brandon Staley a genius. I don't know how I feel if I'm Nick Sorensen and the guy who's not the defensive coach is the genius. Also, let's not forget it's the same Brandon Staley that lost by like 70 to the Raiders and then lost to first
blew the playoff game against Jacksonville, all of that.
There was that one too. So
I think that they have to treat this as Staley is the mind of the defense and Sorensen is the player interface. And so their defensive coordinator really is a two-headed monster.
Yeah.
And when you're doing something like that, it speaks of you're trying to fill in the gaps for a year. And my read is that they're waiting to see what happens with the Jets, and if Robert Saleh is let go, would they then bring him back as the DC? I think that that's kind of in the back of their minds of we need to be prepared for that possibility because this doesn't sound to me like something that's long-term.
I wonder if Demo's not going to be able to come back because he's going to be so expensive if he continues to perform well.
He will, but he's less expensive than Ward. So, my thinking is I want Demo to play outside and start outside.
If he has like a Ward year, will he end up being more expensive because he's younger?
He's younger, but he lacks the size. As Kenny points out, Demo's 5'10". So, that's part of it.
But he's like locked up like who's on the Seahawks? He has a colored hair sometimes, really strong. I'm just blanking. Metcalf. Demo's like locked up Metcalf before. Metcalf's like ginormous and like 6'4" and full of muscle. So I don't know.
So
size hasn't been a huge problem
true.
for him.
But if I had my wish, it would be that Ward and Lenore start outside. Renardo Green starts inside. And that, I think, is their best lineup in terms of coverage and run defense and blitzing. I want all of that. So we'll see if Yadam takes a spot. I think that if Yadam starts, that he would start outside and Demo would go inside. So it's one or the other. And that's up to Green's progression. How does he look? And can he play without getting flagged? The initial exhibition game is going to tell us a lot on Green. How many penalties does he get? Because he holds a lot. What are the refs going to do? If he piles up a lot of flags, then I think that'll hurt him. And then you'll end up with the Yadam scenario of he starts outside, Lenore inside.
And Green didn't participate today, right? He was on the non-participant list. But he's performed previously in camp, so obviously it's the overall picture, but I hope it's not like an injury or something. Maybe he just was tired or something. I don't know. Why would he?
Yeah, they didn't give a reason for why he didn't play, but I'll be looking to see just if he comes back and plays within another day or two.
Yeah, like tomorrow. Yeah, because he was just on the non-participant list. It was what it says, unclear why he wasn't out there, but it's the first practice that he's missed in this camp. So he's been consistent so far. Hopefully not any sort of soft tissue injury, which has affected other players, which is why my next standout player, which is from today's practice, was Tariq Owens, which I just think is exciting because
that's cool. Yeah. T.O.'s kid.
Yeah.
And Wendell Dowd, local
not
Kai.
like just name recognition that is why he stand out. He actually did really well. Like he's not being given, in my opinion, a slot. I'm not even saying that he'll be on the team. Maybe he'll be a practice squad guy that they bring up or something. But right now, because Cowing is out, because Ricky didn't play for part of the practice, like Aiyuk's not there, it's giving these guys an opportunity to perform, and so far Tariq Owens took advantage of that, which is promising.
Yeah. Well, he has, we know that he has the genetics, of course.
Yeah.
But beyond that, we know that he's got the physical skills that you would need. And it's just a question of putting it together, which makes him an ideal candidate for practice squad. And I think that Cody Schrader and Tariq Owens have both made a case that we would probably be best used on the practice squad. And we'll see who else would go on that. But I think those two are people to watch of saying that, yeah, they're probably going to be on the squad.
I wonder if they'll get picked up. That always happens with the 49ers. I feel like they have really good guys that they're trying to stash away, and then the Rams or friggin' Seahawks are like, oh,
Arizona or somebody.
Why are you stashing him away? We should grab that guy up. And really quickly, I want to shout out because Michael Walla, made some other comments that were also interesting that I didn't get to. But when I was talking about the colored hair, he said Jennings. And that guy does also have colored hair, but I was in the reference I was making, I was trying to provoke Metcalf from the Seahawks when I was talking about Demo. But I just wanted to shout out him because he was trying to help me out when I was blanking on names right there. But anything else? Oh, I wanted to ask you. So yeah, how do you feel about the Brandon Staley, Nick Sorensen stuff that's going on? I thought it was interesting that Demo called Staley a genius. Also in practice, the way that it's being set up so far is Nick Sorensen is standing kind of over by Kyle, which is a little bit separate from the actual team drills. But Brandon Staley is over there like shaking guys' hands in between, reps and in between plays. He's like getting a lot of face-to-face contact. To me, it makes sense that Demo had such high praise for him because he's talking to Demo constantly. So I don't know if they're having a little bond there. Maybe I know that Brandon Staley had some good like schemes that he did with Jalen Ramsey in the Rams. So maybe he's looking at Demo as a guy who could be versatile in that way.
Yeah. And there are some parallels that he can look at where Staley can help them. I would think 5-man front would be something that would help both Javon Hargrave and Leonard Floyd to be more effective, and for the Niners to shake things up a little bit, be less predictable, and also simulated pressure. And I think that Demo can be a part of all of those things.
Yeah.
But to me, the key to this team in its flexibility is going to be what happens with D. Winters at linebacker in taking over for Dre Greenlaw for the time being. What happens with Hufanga and Malik Mustafa? And larger, what happens to the secondary at large? That I think that secondary is talented, even though it's young.
It looks like the best that they've had so far, right? Like most depth at least.
And that's something they're going to need. And I also think that that's going to be a key part of the Niners executing simulated pressure. They need to use guys like Jair and Mustafa on the blitz as people that can close and make plays. And D. Winters did that all the time at TCU. So I think that those guys can contribute in a way to what the Niners are hoping to do this year in terms of pivoting from what they've done in the past.
Okay, I love that. That's what Brandon Staley is really good at.
And that's where he adds value.
That makes sense. Okay, well, I'm interested to see how it turns out. I will say, and I know this is more pessimistic a little bit, but if I'm Nick Sorensen, I'm a little, hopefully the defense doesn't struggle because Brandon Staley is getting, in close with the players. And it, to me, kind of feels like Kyle if it wasn't for his reputation, might have just hired Brandon Staley, but the
Probably.
players liked Sorensen. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But if it's a good marriage and it works out, then, maybe I was worrying for no reason. But
if it works, great. But again, it comes across as kind of jury rigging everything together and for a year and seeing.
Yeah, trying to mash it together. And like, if you're the player and there is a down game or you're struggling, you don't exactly know who you're answering to or who's.
Yeah, well, I think it'll be clear for the players that Sorensen is the player interface and their coach on game day, and Staley is the defensive mind that comes up with the game plan and schemes. And those are the different roles. And so, who's your report? Your report is Sorensen. And I would expect that Staley is going to be up in the booth.
Yeah, that's true. I remember him talking about that. Okay. Maybe he's just more, it's like a practice. He's more hands-on. But then when it comes to actual game play calling, that could be a Sorensen thing. And Staley is just like one of the guys who can give his input versus actually making the calls.
Right. And Staley will be instrumental in forming the game plan, working together with Sorensen. But Staley was hired for his defensive mind. That's why he was brought in. And so we'll see how that pairing works out. But my read is it comes across as really temporary. You're kind of binding all this stuff together with duct tape and hoping it works. And we'll see if it does. If I'm Staley, I want to get a read on the players to know what they do well, what they enjoy doing, what they're most confident in. And that helps me in my game planning and in scheming to figure out who's best used where. That makes sense.
Like maybe this is a critical time for him to be getting closer with players because he's trying to figure them out so he can properly.
Right. He's trying to assess the roster. He's trying to evaluate who does what. So I can understand him doing that.
I'm like burning the house down, and you're like, actually, the thing that makes way more sense.
Yeah, sometimes
all this panic.
Yeah, sometimes there's a logical explanation. I think that's what this is Staley wants to assess who he has. What do they do well? What are they most confident in? How are they best used? Because he's the one that's going to come up with a game plan. And then in consultation with Sorensen of just, here's where I think the players are at. Here's what I think works best against Team X. And then go from there.
Okay. Well, tomorrow they have one more padded practice before they have a day off. Over under 1 interception for Brock Purdy. So 0.5. Over under 0.5 interceptions.
Over. I would think 1 interception, but what I would be looking for is just less than 3. As long, I want to see the progression.
No more of that trend. Let's have that one down.
Right. Yeah. I'm just focused on the trend line. I'm not focused on a number specifically. Just I want to see progress in the direction of not throwing picks.
I love that. Okay. Tom, do you have any articles coming up that you're writing?
There will be later. I'm going to have one of my 4 questions columns be coming out in a couple days. And
okay.
then,
I love that one.
Once the Olympic track starts, I disappear. It's just, this is my Super Bowl.
Awesome. It's been fun to watch. I was telling you, I don't know how much I can say on the show, but I went to practice last week at Levi's, and then after there was like a really good Mexican restaurant that was freaking delicious. But when I was there, they were playing the basketball, Germany versus US, and it was a good game. It was like stressful. I feel like basketball games are like 115 plus points. This was like 70, and like it was like a gritty, like the Germany was winning, US was winning. The US ended up winning, but it was close. And it was a really good game. But yeah. Everyone make sure to follow Tom on Twitter, NinerCast. Make sure to check out that 4 questions article. I always love reading that. It actually informs these shows sometimes because I'll like write them down and try to answer them throughout the week and then ask Tom about them later. So make sure to check out his articles on si.com, and you can get those by following him on Twitter, and then make sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'll be going live tomorrow with Marco, I'm pretty sure.
Great.
So, yeah.
Great. Look forward to that.
Thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Ashley. It was a lot of fun. Always.
Thank you for joining me, Tom. I had a great time. Really quickly, I want to shout out to my dad. He was tuning in and out, but I know that he was talking with a doctor because he has some neck problems. So if you guys believe in good, spirit, send a little, prayer, whatever it is, send a little thing out to my dad because
Send some karma his way.
Yeah. He's doing okay. I don't want to make it sound like a big deal, but
yeah,
I saw him tuning in and I was like, oh, because I know he's dealing with that. So yeah, but thank you guys.
Get better.
Thank you guys so much. Have a great week. We're going to have another practice to review tomorrow, and we'll see if Tom is right and starts trending down a little bit with those interceptions, or if it keeps steady, and we'll have a lot to talk about by next week. Bye, you guys. Thank you so much. Have a great day.